Hey tribe, how are you? So today's share, some of you guys know now I'm redirecting my focus and energy to stay really committed to the text. Thanks to you guys. There's been a couple of you guys that have posted some things about you too have gone back to the material and are finding some juicy nuggets, and that's been really inspirational for me. I've felt a lot of energy start to like spin out and having to revisit some painful stuff, and then it's all kind of loop back to just be like, step one, practice gratitude and coming back into clarity. And then I was randomly tapped into step 8, which is being willing and open, and looking at a few different pieces of where the pain comes from and where the cycle is kind of guiding us, and like, you know, recognizing an underlying fear of letting go, and then seeing the openness and the willingness to be like, you know, be open to moving forward, be open to new people, new experiences, you know, in every sense of the word. And it's amazing how it's like these tiny little shifts, and then we get into like suddenly a new vibration, you know, really new sense of self. And then from that sense of self, we just kind of have to keep watching things unfold and continue to encourage ourselves to be an active, creative function in our reality. So today, for those of you who are not fully unplugged, I want to do a share about how unplugging is from, again, this is feedback off of clients, but unplugging is ultimately one of those like quick fixes. So I've had people pretty much within 3 to 4 days of unplugging, like their reality shapeshift. So one of my clients quite a few years ago had a shop, and she was dealing with just like, my customers are negative. I just find the energy is really negative in that space. And she was reading the news and listening to the news, or, you know, listening to the radio in the morning on the way to work, and like maybe putting the TV news on in the morning when she was getting ready. So we trialed it for a week, but she said by about midweek, she saw a complete shift in her work environment, that people were more positive. She felt more positive. Business was busier. So there was all of these really quite drastic shifts in her positive, you know, better vibes, how to get better vibes in her world, just by not watching the news, just by not having this sort of 20-minute, 30-minute, or hour-long negative, because when we look at a lot of news stories, here's the thing about the news. Now, I don't watch the news and not been plugged into the mainstream media agenda for almost 10 years, and yet I'm still very aware of things that are going on in the world. We don't necessarily need to be bombarded by the program every single day to have an awareness of what's going on, especially if we're working on connecting to the intuition, because the intuition ultimately shines light on everything that we need to know about for our own personal story, for our own personal, you know, evolution. So energetically speaking, we have to look at how our TV consumption, our you know, what we're ingesting visually, so our newspapers, what we're reading, what kind of games we're playing, how much we're on our phone, hands up. Like, I'm also looking at my behavior with phones and really seeing the kind of the spin and how it's not necessarily that efficient or healthy necessarily. But again, once I'm aware of it, I can start implementing structural changes that can help me relieve myself of it in future timelines. So, and that's our ability, that's our power in our own consciousness, is like really honoring the truth of who you know yourself to be, and sensing the kind of structural changes you'll need to make throughout your life. And that's why I think, like, if you really want to get to know yourself, stop listening to agendas that try to tell you who you are, right? Like, there's wars going on, and there's famine, and there's strife, and there's like huge economical disparity, and yet every single day being bombarded by those problems where we appear to not be creating solution simply weighs us down. Density, right? That programming is of a certain frequency, and it's dense. It's kind of primitive in the sense that it triggers our stress responses. When visually seeing bombs being dropped on common humanity makes us feel stressed and in fear. Seeing programs about violence makes us feel stressed and in fear. So that's not a good way to start the day. And if we know that we create our own reality, that we're responsible, if we're letting that program imprint us, we have to honor the fact that we're going to be outputting that same kind of fearful story of lack of power, because it's the program of insidious going over and over really scary things, but not making a change, not pioneering solution. So we're living in times where those of us engaging with work like this, we are deep down inside committing to being a solution, committing to being part of a proactive cleanup crew in a world that needs some loving assistance, in a world that needs to be able to face some darkness and go through some healing and make big changes, right? And so we can't make those changes if we're still part of that old program. And at some point, if we're still choosing consciously or unconsciously to allow that program to imprint us on a daily basis. So today, I really just want to offer you guys the opportunity to unplug if you haven't done already. Change it up. Put on some music in the morning rather than the news. Or put on some like meditations, or, you know, have a 20-minute practice instead of watching the news, as in a yoga practice. Sit in meditation for longer instead of watching the news. It's like, or look at some of the exercises. Let me do this for you. Come on, Malls, get your stuff together. Okay, so if we look at a nice exercise from Unplug. We can. So all you guys got to do is try one of the exercises. So on a weekday, avoid listening, watching, or reading any news until midday. I would ask that you just stop altogether and see how it feels. Stop engaging completely for 3 days and notice the following things. Was it more difficult to engage in conversation with coworkers? So is there like a sense of peer pressure, you know, conformity pressure of watching the news? And are you going to feel ashamed or guilty or not enough or excluded if you don't engage with the dominant agenda, right? So notice those underlying shames or embarrassment feelings that come up if we can't join the conversation, right? Even if it's a low vibrational conversation. Did you feel out of the loop? Did you feel any different? So just making a note, making those little changes, and then being super aware of what comes up emotionally, vibrationally for you, and then looking at that, owning it, transforming it, and remind yourself that you're allowed to be exactly who you want to be. You don't have to do anything else that anyone else is doing. Even this, you can be like, "Fuck you, Melly. I want to watch the news. I love it. It makes me feel amazing." Fair dues. I'm not, and that I'm sure is true for people. Like, I'm sure people on their path like love politics and it makes them feel so juiced up and they want to get engaged in all the different conversations. For me, it's not like that. You know, I don't get a lot of the conversations that politicians are having. I don't vibrate with them. I don't res with them, right? So it's like I felt like starting a different kind of conversation that felt good to me. Very selfish. And yet, from a place of heartfelt compassion, it's stepping into that desire and realizing, oh my God, there's other people who want to have this conversation too. There's other people who are getting bored of listening to the same story over and over again that makes them feel powerless and afraid. So now we're just saying, actually, let's do the opposite. Let's become fearless. Let's become radiant beacons of love and truth and integrity and honesty. And, you know, when you think of that kind of energy, that is the energy that calls out corruption. That's the energy of the beings of light standing in front of the war machines and saying, we've had enough. You're going to stop and turn those machines off, and we're going to start to have a decent conversation about how this planet functions, how this planet operates. We can either keep operating from a perspective of separation and fear and illusion, or we can operate from a perspective of love and unity and illusion. You know, we have the power to create the holographic vision that we choose. And more of us who do it will continue to see more and more of a loving and benevolent reality. And then we will continue to keep shining more and more light for more and more people. So for this week, or today, or for the next 3 days, just stop watching TV completely. Stop watching and engaging with the news. Be proactive. So line up your like playlists. Make sure you're putting like music on, or make sure you're planning to replace that time, or just keep yourself in silence. Just don't turn the TV on, because even having it on in the background affects us, whether we want it to, whether we think it does or not. It definitely does. Having that drone of drama vibrationally impacting us subliminally is definitely keeping us fixed in that drama loop. So unplug, break free, make some notes, write about your experience. If you have still been unplugged up till now and you're watching this, then definitely make a note, because I'd be curious about your journey, if it's also similar to many of the people I've worked with. And as far as if you're still feeling weighted, if you're still kind of like having a hard time feeling more positive when you're doing your morning meditation practices, then check in with that. Be more choosy with what you're consuming. So opt for Netflix programs, opt for YouTube programs where you're engaging with less kind of mainstream agenda and more alternative, I guess wholesome, just people putting stuff out there, right? And less advertising. So that's important as well. Hope that was useful to you guys. Love you loads. Have a wonderful day. I look forward to speaking to you soon, updating you, and just feedback with me. Let me know if there's any nuggets from the material that you're feeling that you wanna dig a little bit deeper into, and I can just offer intuitive insights and shares from my perspective. So love you guys. Have a great day. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.